Hi guys, how are you doing? Welcome back. Now, up until today, we've looked at simple logic and things that take conditions like if statements and while statements. But now we're going to look at something a bit more interesting called a function. Now, functions are maybe a little bit complex, but they're a lot more interesting, they're a lot more powerful, and we can do a lot with them. We might need to split this into two videos so we can cover everything. Well, not everything, but we can try and understand what to do with them and why we would use them. So let's get into this and create a script. Now, before we even write out our function, it may interest you to know that we've already been using functions from day one of this series. Now, whenever we open a script, we see this print hello world. Now, I think I've been calling this a statement sometimes or a print command, but this is actually a print function. And there's also the wait function and various others. I think these are the main two we've used. But these are functions, these are default functions that provided to us not by Roblox, but by the Lua language itself, which Roblox uses. Now, these are system functions, if you like, but we can define our own functions. And to do this, we type out function, and then we give it a name, much like a variable. So we can call this whatever we like. I'm going to say my greeting is going to be the name of this function. And then we have these two brackets, just like down here. Now, this function is a very simple function, so it's not actually going to expect any values at all. So we're going to press new line, and of course, you've got that end, so it means it's inside the code block. And we're going to use this print function inside our own custom function, and we're going to say print hello, I'm running inside this function. Okay, and we'll just delete this for now, we don't need that. If I go ahead and run the game, what you'll notice is this does absolutely nothing at all. And the reason for that is we need to reference the function. So we type out my greeting, and you see it's come up. So we just press enter and it'll autocomplete for us. And of course, we need those two brackets on the end there because it is a function. So if I go ahead and run the game now, you'll see it says, hello, I'm running inside this function, just as we expected. So we can, of course, put values. We can pass what's known as parameters to the function. So let's go back to our line here, our my greeting function. And let's say we expect a value here. Now, this is like defining a variable. It's a new custom variable that's only associated with this my greeting function. So I'm going to expect a message variable, and what I'm saying here is whatever data you send to my greeting. So if I typed a number or I typed a string, that is going to get saved as this message variable. So if I print instead of that string, if I simply print out message, it's going to print out the value of that. And the value of that is whatever it is when we call the function. So I could have my greeting hello, and then on a new line I could have my greeting, and then you notice I get this little prompt that comes up and it says void my greeting brackets message, and message appears in bold. So it's reminding me that I need to pass in this parameter, this value. In this case, I can just have some numbers even. And I could do this again. I could say could equal true. So you could do all kinds of data types. And this would be a bit odd, but it's just for an example. So hello, this is another example. And I can pass all of these bits of data into this function. And whenever I say my greeting, it's going to go up to the top of the script, find the my greeting function we created, and then it's going to print out whatever is the value of message. And so if we run that now, we've got hello 236 true, hello, this is another example. And so this is working just the same as if we used the print function. But in this case, we're just adding an extra layer of abstraction really by using our own custom function, which then in turn calls the system function print. So what else can we do with this? Well, we could even create our own calculator if we liked. We could have a add function, for example. So we'll create a function called add. And so if we want to add two numbers together, well, we need two numbers. So add was going to expect two values, one called first num, and then we add a comma and we type out the name of our second value. It's going to be second num. Remember, these are like the variable names. So we close off the bracket, add a new line, and then we're going to need to create a third variable, and this is going to be called total. So total is equal to the first num plus the second num. That's how we add numbers together, right? And now we can print out the value of total. And if we go down here and we can say add, and we open up the bracket, and you can see it is very small, so you might not be able to see this, but it does say first num, and that's in bold. So we'll type out one number, 23, add a comma, and we'll add a second number, 5, close the bracket, and if we run that, it should hopefully add 23 to 5, and it's going to save that to the new variable, which is total, and then it's going to print out the value of total, which should equal 28. So if we run that, there you go, we've got 28 in the output. And oh yeah, so you might notice that total is underlined in blue here, and it's saying global total is only used in the enclosing function. Consider changing it to local. Now, this is referring to something called variable scope. And what does that mean? Well, just like these variables here, we can only access these inside of the add function. So if I went down here and I typed in print and I tried to print out the value of first num, well, it's underlined it. It said unknown global first num. The computer's saying to me, what do you mean first num? I've never heard of this. And that's because first num only exists inside the add function. Anywhere else, it doesn't have any meaning because we've only defined it within the limited scope or the limited space of that function. Outside of there, it just doesn't exist. And so it's suggesting that we make this total variable also local. So for example, a variable that we created up here, so we had variable or whatever, my var equals 10, then this is what's known as a global variable because we can always access it from within here. We can print out the value of my var, and we could also print it out down here. It's a global variable because we can always access it globally wherever we are. However, the total variable, we can also access that everywhere as well, but we don't need to be able to. We simply want to print it out, and then we don't really need to access it down here. It has no purpose. So it's suggesting we add local in front. So if we make it a local variable, we type out local, add a space, and then give the name of that variable. So now you'll notice down here where it says print total, it's underlined and it's saying unknown. I don't know what that is anymore. And that's fine because it only needs to exist in here. So if I created a new variable, I could create a new variable called total down here, and this would actually be a completely different thing to the local variable that's inside here. I hope that makes sense for you. Again, with all these videos, if you're never sure about anything I mention, just leave me a comment down below and I can try and either explain to you in a response, or if necessary I can expand on it in the next video. So let's create a few more functions like this. Let's create a minus function or a subtract function. That would be more mathematically correct. And this is going to work much the same. It's just instead of the plus, we have a minus symbol, and we'll have a multiply function as well. And the symbol for multiply is the little asterisk. And copy and paste that again. And we'll rename this one to divide. And of course, we'll replace the plus symbol with the slash or the dividing symbol. And so we've got 4 functions there. Zoom out so we can see all of them at once. And then we'll go back to the bottom and we've got add 23 and 5. We can subtract. Let's use the same numbers, 23 from 5 from 23. We can call the multiply function 23 times 5, and of course the divide function 23 and 5. And of course we can reuse these functions. That's the great thing about functions, we can call them again. So I might add the value 23 and 5, and then I might want to also add the value of 24 and 2. And so I can just keep calling that function, and whenever I call it, it's going to say, oh, you want to use the add function, and it's going to go back up to the top where I've referenced the add function, and it's going to run the code that's relative to that add function. So if we go ahead and run this now, we're going to get a bunch of those values. Let's see what we've got. We've got 28, 26, 18, 115, and 4.6. So that's the add, subtracts, and the multiplies, and the divisions. Wonderful. So what else can we do with this? Well, currently we are printing out the value within the function. However, we might not actually want to print it straight away. We might want to return it back to where it's being called from. So if I use the word return, you'll notice that highlights in blue. So it's a keyword, and I want to return the value of total. Now, we'll see what this does in a minute. So when we call the value function, it's instead of printing it out this time, it's going to send us this value back. So we actually need a way of capturing that value, if you like, because otherwise, if we run this now, when we say add 23 and 5 together, it's actually going to still do that, but we're not going to see anything in the output. So if we want to print that, we'll have to put print and wrap the call to our function inside the print command. So we'll say we want to print out the value of the return value of the add function. So if I run that, there you go, we've got 28. And another way we could do this is we could save it to a variable. So we could say total equals add 23 and 5, and then we could simply print out the value of that variable like we're already familiar with. And this is actually a much better way of doing things through returning values. Then they're a lot more flexible. Say we wanted to create another function called calculations. I don't know what this one's all about. So this is going to have a first num and a second num as well. But inside here, instead of doing the calculation like we've done here, we could actually call a bunch of other functions. So we could say local total equals add, and we could send the first num and the second num that we've received into the calculations function, and then we can then send that in to the add function, which is going to be saved to the total variable. We can then print out this is going to be totally crazy, and we can use the multiply function now, and we can say multiply the total, comma, let's multiply it by 10, close off that line of brackets, and then we need to close off the print function bracket as well, so there'll be 2 brackets on the end there. Now that's a lot of functions going on. What do we think is going to happen here? So if we call the calculations function first off, and we're going to say 10 and 5. So the first num is going to be equal to 10, and the second num is going to be equal to 5. And then when it gets these 2 numbers, it's going to reference the add function. So it's going to go up to the top, the add function, and of course first num is still going to be 10 and second num 5, and so that's going to return the value of the total variable, which is 15, and when it gets to 15, it's then going to send that to the multiply function, and that's going to multiply it by 10. So if we run that, we've got 150. Wonderful, just as we expected. I've been talking for quite a while now. I hope I haven't bored you too much. I think what we'll do is we'll take this into a second video, and then I'm going to show you why we'd actually want to use functions and the kind of things we can use them for in games, which is going to hopefully be a lot more interesting. Okay? So thanks for watching. Please leave a like if this made any sense. If this didn't, if it didn't make any sense, leave a comment. Let's figure out how we can make it better and make it make sense for you. Please subscribe. Buy all my wonderful virtual merch. Thanks for watching.